Who are some wide receivers that the Baltimore Ravens could potentially target in a trade? We talk about that and more with a very special guest next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we've returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon. NFL. We're back here, a Wednesday edition of the show, midweek, trying to move on from that Week 6 Giants loss. The Ravens suffered 24-20, but I know right now there is a lot of frustration, and look, understandably so. And here to break things down with me here today, talk about wide receiver trade targets, is Cole Jackson of Two Guys Watching Football Call. I'm ecstatic to have you back on. I wish we were talking under better circumstances, but here we are. The Ravens are a 3-3 football team, unfortunately, here.
Yeah, no, super unfortunate. The fan base is out for blood and a lot of justifiable frustration, which I get, and some of it I agree with, some of it I don't agree with, and I'm sure we're going to get through all of my personal opinions today.
Yeah, and that's what I brought you on here for. Cole's opinions. We're going to get into them all, and I want to start off with the game, 24-20, just where you thought it all went wrong. I go back, Cole. I've said it all week so far, the general sloppiness of the game, both on offense and somewhat on defense, but I do put it more on the offense. I think the defense played particularly well throughout the game. They held the Giants relatively in check, especially Saquon Barkley, but you see the 10 penalties for 74 yards. You see the 1 for 3 in the red zone. You see the mistakes by Lamar Jackson, and it's just these little things that go hand in hand with each other that contribute to these devastating losses, it feels like.
Yeah, there seemed to be some real confusion pre-snap. I actually just tweeted about it that it wasn't just, there were the false starts. I think, Morgan Moses had 2. I think Pat Ricard had 3 formation false start penalties. That was 5 of the 10 alone. And it wasn't even just that, though. As I was going through the film and pulling my Linderbaum clips and my Ronnie Stanley clips, there was inconsistent execution coming off the ball by the offensive line, and it looked like they all weren't on the same page with, they're on the road, they're using silent counts, that sort of thing, but they were just not on the same page in terms of the snap count, and it reared its ugly head when Linderbaum snapped the ball early. You could clearly tell Kenyon Drake, who was motioning back into the backfield, he wasn't aligned yet. Don't think that was on purpose. It looked like the snap came early, and it wasn't, everyone kept saying an errant snap. It was snapped exactly where it was supposed to go, but Lamar Jackson wasn't ready for it. Looked like a snap timing issue for me, just kind of compounded the issue. And, some, even on successful plays, you would see one of the tackles coming off the ball slower than everybody else on the line. So just consistent sloppiness, poor execution, poor preparation. Those were really the key issues kind of on a snap-to-snap basis. I think the big failure of the Ravens offense was lack of success in the red zone, specifically going 1 for 3 on red zone trips. They were 1st and 5, and they ended up with a field goal. Just unacceptable, especially for a team that has had so much success there in the past. So that's really what the difference has been. They started really well this year, but in the last 3 weeks, they're 3 for 9 in red zone trips in terms of getting touchdowns, which is just unacceptable.
And you go back to that red zone possession where you have a 1st and goal from the Giants 5. The way the Ravens ran the ball on Sunday, Cole, where they averaged 8.8 yards per carry. Lamar Jackson and Kenyon Drake both averaging over 11 yards per carry themselves. But you see 3 straight pass plays from the 5-yard line. And you look to Greg Roman in that situation and you go, why don't you just do what you're doing best right now, which is the run game? Did you get that sense that they needed to run the ball more and kind of take what they were given in the run game?
Yeah, so they had 9 red zone plays on Sunday. I did a film room on Monday afternoon on this. So 9 red zone plays. I broke down all 9, and they passed the ball on 7 out of 9. So it was a very pass-heavy red zone attack. There were a couple, specifically the 2 first down plays on the field goal drives. Obviously, the third drive was the touchdown to Mark Andrews. I actually didn't have a huge issue with those pass play calls because guys were wide open. But then when they got to 2nd and 5, for example, and the other one was 2nd and 10 from the Giants 16, that's where it's kind of like, why would you set yourself up for, 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 5 where it does become a pass situation? So that's really where I had the specific issue with the play calling, but also lack of execution. I mean, Mark Andrews dropped 2 balls, one of which was deflected in the end zone when he's wide open. The other one was on 3rd and 10 on the first red zone trip, and it just hit him in the hand. So there was 2 drops there. Devin Duvernay was wide open on a crossing route, and Lamar Jackson threw off his back foot and threw it short. So, I mean, there's play calling issues, specifically 2nd down, in my opinion, but also a complete lack of execution when the passes were called, because the purpose of a play call is to create an opportunity to score. And from what I could see on the film, guys were in a position to score, wide receivers, tight ends running wide open, and just lack of execution getting the ball, whether it's a drop, a missed pass, poor pass protection, just these kind of cycle through different plays, and it's constant disconnect across the offense.
Yeah, and I asked Spencer Schultz this yesterday, Cole, but do you feel like this is more of a coaching issue or more of an execution issue? Or do you kind of just ball it up into one and say it's a little of both and they have to figure it out on all fronts?
It's tough because some of the lack of execution pieces definitely comes down to being a coaching issue. So, for example, with Greg Roman, I mean, people always say I defend Greg Roman. I said Greg Roman should have been fired in the offseason, so I don't know why I'm this marked as this big Greg Roman defender. But when it comes to Greg Roman, he has a lot of complicated aspects in his offense. For example, he'll have the tight ends and fullbacks aligning in 3 different spots, the F, the Y, and the U on any given play. He's pairing that with a league high amount of motion. This is all stuff that these players need to know in their playbook. And so when it comes to game time, you're asking them to execute a much more complicated role than any other team in the league. And that's where I think you could run into mental errors. So yes, the players are the ones making the mistake, but there's certainly an aspect of coaching and complicating the role and over, especially a guy like Patrick Ricard. He had 3 pretty major penalties in this one, but you also have him playing tight end and fullback, and, you have him out in the slot motioning in, and it's not like he's just playing the simple fullback role. He has a very loaded plate, and that can lead to mental errors. So there's certainly a coaching aspect to that, and that's why it's so simplistic to blame one thing. But I mean, some of the stuff like just missing throws or dropping balls, that's pure execution in my opinion. But when it came to some of the pre-snap penalties, I think you could definitely see how coaching could contribute and lighten some of the loads there.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people do go to the Lamar Jackson throw where there was the exchange between Linderbaum and Jackson where it just wasn't timed up right. And it's the simple throw there is just to throw it away and not kind of force that throw into a jumping Ricard where 2 defenders were there. So there's that to look at. But yeah, I think there are clear coaching issues where you have to clean those up. But execution, sometimes it does come down to that. But Cole, I do want to give some flowers to the defense here. I know that the 20-10 lead did evaporate, but they weren't done any favors by that Ravens offense with the turnovers. They were given a very short field twice. I thought they did their job for the most part, and again, that's why I say this game is more on the offense than it was the defense. How do you think the defense performed?
I was pretty happy with the defense. I thought their pass rush was pretty good. It was definitely more manufactured. They had 17 pressures on the day, which is very high, and a couple of sacks as well. But it came from a wide spread of guys. They had a couple of the linebackers, a couple of the safeties having pressures. So I think a guy that's really shown improvement is Mike McDonald, going from the first couple of weeks to the last few weeks, just in terms of his approach. And I mean, they're holding opponents to less and less. And the big aspect was obviously limiting Saquon Barkley, who has been kind of back to his elite self this year. They held him to 3.8 yards per carry. Really hard to shut down a guy like that, but they definitely limited him. And I think Spencer said it best. They really forced the Giants to have Daniel Jones beat them. They basically said, we're going to do everything in our power to take Saquon out of this game script. Jones is going to have to beat us, and in critical moments, he did. The touchdown the touchdown pass, comes to mind where it looked like there was a miscommunication between the zone coverage pass off. So, I mean, that popped up. But overall, hold your opponent to 24 in this day and age. You should be probably winning that game, especially when you have Lamar Jackson on your offense.
Yep, hard to agree with that. And for Saquon, his performance lost me some fantasy games, but I wish it would have been a little sweeter if the Ravens had won, because I take Ravens wins over fantasy wins.
Oh man, he should have
obviously.
walked that touchdown in. I have him too, and I was like, why aren't you scoring that? Like, why are you sliding?
It's the 0% chance that the Ravens win versus like the maybe 0.8888% chance, but I'm like, give me the 6. Like, if you're gonna, Ravens
give
gonna
me
lose
that, give me
anyway.
them fantasy points.
I know, but again, I take the Ravens wins over fantasy wins. So the Ravens loss and a fantasy loss, that's the combo I don't want. But unfortunately, yeah, that's how it went. But coming up in our second set, we're going to be diving into wide receiver trade targets and if the Ravens are even going to make a move for a wide receiver. Our thoughts on that. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on the show. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about LinkedIn. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stage wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. I've used LinkedIn for a ton of things in my life. It's really helped me out, and it's really easy to create a job post on LinkedIn Jobs for free. You add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. They have simple tools you can use, like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. And it's really important to finish the year strong, and the right team member can really help you do that. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostrecker here with Cole Jackson. And Cole, I know there's a lot of talk about the wide receiver position right now. A lot of talk where it seems like this passing offense obviously goes through their tight ends. Mark Andrews had 106 yards receiving on Sunday against the Giants. The Ravens receivers combined had 5 catches for 45 yards. They're missing Rashad Bateman in a really bad way right now, it feels like. And it's where everybody I've said moves up a rung on that ladder. So you're relying on guys like Demarcus Robinson and James Prochet and Tylan Wallace, who haven't really done a ton this year, unfortunately. So on a scale of 1 to 10, Cole, where's your panic level, I guess, on the wide receiver position for Baltimore?
I mean, this is a tough one because do I want to go out and trade for DJ Moore, which would put me up around the 8, 9, 10 region? I'd probably say yes. I'd love to go get DJ Moore. I remember I tweeted 2019 mid-season. I said they should be getting out there and getting digs at all costs. And then 2020 offseason comes around and they didn't do it. The Bills did. And, it's is a similar – it's kind of similar, that you have a guy that I think can be a wide receiver 1 in this league. I think would fit the offense. I think he'd give Lamar Jackson a pretty big target. But the big question is, are these investments in wide receivers going to pan out in how the offense is called? And that's really where I'm just not sure, because we are seeing this year much higher use of heavy personnel, less wide receivers on the field. You're seeing Pat Ricard out snap the wide receivers. And there's a lot of frustration about it. But they are statistically better in heavy this year. So, but the question is that because they don't have the wide receiver talent? Obviously, with Rashad Bateman being out, this passing offense has taken, a huge step back. I definitely would like to see them improve the wide receiver position, because I think if your best players, I think any OC is going to be forced to put their best players on the field. And I think with the group they have right now, Patrick Ricard is part of their best players to be put on the field, not the wide receivers. So I think, that's why you're seeing less Demarcus Robinson and, less James Prochet. So, I would go out there, upgrade the wide receiver position, and force Greg Roman's hand to get those wide receivers on the field and see a little. We only played 2 snaps of 11 personnel on Sunday. That is, and both were on the last drive when the fumble happened. So it's absurd. They're not going to use 3 wide receiver sets right now until Bateman's back, and then you might see them again. We definitely saw them early in the year, but they just didn't have the depth to survive a Rashad Bateman injury. I think we all knew that going into the year. Unfortunately, the injury happened, and now they're kind of stuck. So, I mean, I would definitely like to see them make a move.
And with that move for you, Cole, based off everything you said about the play calling and about the talent level, would you, in this situation right now, swing for the fences and maybe give up a 1 or a 2 for a player like a DJ Moore or Jerry Jeudy, Terry McLaurin, etc.? Would you go maybe the middle route, where it's maybe a 3 for, who knows, a Curtis Samuel, maybe a Brandin Cooks, or is it more like a 5th or a 6th for Denzel Mims or Kendrick Bourne? Where are you kind of in terms of what the Ravens should do if they do make a move for a wide receiver, draft capital wise?
I was all over Robbie Anderson, which I guess would put me in the third category. But now that he's kind of gone, I seriously think I'd just go out, spend the draft capital and go get a DJ Moore or someone like that. The big question is DJ Moore even available now that they traded Robbie Anderson? I tend to lean probably towards no, because he's on a very good contract, which is why I have so much interest in him. For a wide receiver 1, I think you're loving that contract number the next 2 years after this year. And so they moved on from Robbie. Obviously he got kicked off their bench on Sunday and was traded to the Cardinals the very next day. So I would imagine that ship has sailed. A guy like Terry would obviously be a really good fit. I think, again, he's a similar skill set to DJ Moore. They just paid him. Would they really trade him? I don't think so. So if those big targets, who tend to be guys that just got paid, that people are mentioning could be trade targets, I don't know if they're that available. So I'd probably lean into that second tier now. And it's kind of I think Curtis Samuel could be a really unique fit. Essentially, I need a guy that's able to make plays downfield. The Ravens have shown that when their pass attack is going to work well, it's going to be Lamar Jackson pushing the ball downfield. Early in the year, he led the league in ADOT. Those things are kind of shifting just based on the offense they're calling now. Really think they need that threat on the boundary that's going to, hopefully take some of the focus away from Mark Andrews in the middle of the field.
Yeah, and I have seen a lot about Brandin Cooks. Do you feel like that would be an option, especially if the Texans continue their fall here?
Cooks is one of those guys where, he's been on 4 teams now, and I just don't get it because he's good everywhere he goes. So I don't know what it is about Brandin Cooks that teams just keep moving him, but yeah, would love him. Again, boundary receiver that I think is able to make plays downfield. I think it's a perfect fit. If the Texans aren't using him for some reason, he's crushing me in one of my fantasy leagues. So definitely a guy that could make sense. And again, like you said, be in that reasonable compensation area. Would have to look at the contract. Don't know what it looks like in terms of feasibility off the top of my head, but in terms of skill set fit, really good fit.
Yeah, and I feel like we have seen the Ravens definitely try to go for speed here. We see the Andy Isabel practice squad signing, and obviously the right now at the time of this recording visit of DeSean Jackson, who by the time you're listening, maybe he signed, maybe he hasn't. But do you feel like, Cole, there is a huge drop-off in the talent between a DeSean Jackson type player and maybe that last tier, like a Denzel Mims, a KJ Hamler, Kendrick Bourne? Or do you still feel like it'd be worth it for them to even throw a 5th or a 6th out there for one of those guys?
I would way rather trade for one of those guys than get DeSean. I don't get it. He hasn't played a full season since 2018. We all know he's going to get hurt. Was one of my favorite players to watch. He has a really cool last name too, so I'll give him credit there. I'd love to get a Jackson Baltimore jersey. That's always, I got one, would love to. Those areas are nice, and he probably would come in here and have one of those signature. He always has one of those games every year where he has 3 catches for 152 yards and 2 touchdowns, because that's just what he does. But then he fades into obscurity again. So again, just seems like the veteran retread that's going to come in here and not make the impact. I think they really need to ante up for the skill level they need.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, I'll say, and I'll ask you another question. Do you feel like the Jackson move would be better if they do sign him, if it wasn't the only one? So they go with Jackson and then they trade for that middle tier, or they add one of those bottom tier, or even go for the DJ Moore.
Yeah, there's no harm in adding a skill set like that. It seems like, and they've been putting him on the field, but it seems like there's not a lot going on with Tylan Wallace there. Same with James Prochet. They're not really getting the targets I think we expected them to get in a bigger opportunity. So if they're not going to go with the young lads, then go get vets that may be able to do what you want to do on offense. But if Rashad Bateman's coming back and they trade for a bigger named wide receiver, I wouldn't really see the need for a guy like DeSean Jackson, just because I don't know how he gets on the field. I want Duvernay on the field, for example. And that would kind of be their 3 wide receiver set, would be traded player, Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay. But if they're, trying to use a couple games, or they have them on the practice squad where they can give them a couple elevations, something like a practice squad where you're going to call them up, there's literally zero risk. So, I mean, sure, why not? But if the move, I guess, if they want to improve the wide receiver position and the big move is to sign 48-year-old DeSean Jackson, I don't see how it moves the needle for this offense.
And I guess moving away from the trading aspect of this, I know, Cole, we've talked before about the free agents on the market right now. Although Beckham is clearly getting closer to returning to the field, you still have Will Fuller out there. Would those be moves you'd be okay with?
I'd love to get Odell. Said it from the get-go. Wanted to sign him early because it would have given you a chance to give the young lads a look, but then also have him coming back at the end of the season. Plus, love him for future years. I think he'd fit really well. But, is he going to choose to come to Baltimore? I really don't know. I would imagine he'd want some sort of commitment to the usage. Can't really say I blame him or any wide receiver based on the personnel you're seeing come out every week. So, that's where I stand on Odell. Will Fuller, someone should probably check on him. Is he still why are we bringing in DeSean Jackson before Will Fuller? I don't really get it. I would have brought in Will Fuller before Demarcus Robinson. So, I mean, definitely, again, the big criticism there being, is it just a Sammy Watkins where, he's going to have a couple of decent games in the offense and then end up hurt again. I would imagine that's probably why he's still available. But they definitely need to find someone durable that can contribute. It does seem like that's only going to come to this team through the trade market.
Right. And I know for a lot of the wide receivers, we were talking about how you had to anticipate missed games with some of these guys, especially the Sammy Watkins, the Julio Joneses, and those types of players. So it would make sense. But Cole, I want the official Cole Jackson prediction. What do you feel like this team is going to do wide receiver wise? Do you feel like it's going to be a trade? Do you feel like they're just going to completely stay put and roll with DeSean Jackson? What's the Cole Jackson prediction?
The Cole Jackson prediction of what the Ravens are going to do, because I don't want any tweets saying this is what I was going to do. But what I think the Ravens will do is probably you'll see DeSean Jackson added to the practice squad and get a couple elevations. And if there's good performance, they'll sign him to the 53. That's my prediction on what they'll do.
All right, it's official. The Cole Jackson prediction is in, and yeah, we'll see what happens with them. I still think adding a veteran or maybe two, if it is DeSean Jackson, would be the right move. Definitely, they just need something there, and I think that there are talented players in the trade market. There are a couple left on the free agent market too, so we'll see what they do. But coming up in the final segment, we'll be diving into the Ravens' offensive line performance and overall outlook on the team and more. So be sure to stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is the number one source for football betting info. This season, you can find all the latest parallel developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles, analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check out on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to the BetOnline.net website today. Use mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with Cole Jackson of Two Guys Watching Football. And Cole, I have to ask you about this offensive line because I've been impressed overall. I think there were a lot of question marks coming into the year, how guys would perform. Where was Ronnie Stanley going to be when he came back? Where's the mobility? But I think Stanley has looked phenomenal. I think we've seen contributions from guys like Ben Powers. I think Tyler Linderbaum has exceeded expectations so far. And Kevin Zeitler's Kevin Zeitler. And obviously you have the Daniel Falele aspect of this whole thing too. So where are you on your offensive line right now in Baltimore based off of what your expectations were going into the year?
Yeah, no, I expected stability with Stanley being back. The if Stanley gets back was always the huge caveat to any O-line analysis, just because unless you're going to draft a very, very high offensive tackle, it's always going to be tough to backfill the left tackle position without spending the money. The Ravens, I think, in my opinion, and I've had this argument over the last 2 months that they didn't stack contingency plans. They got all the way down to their fourth option in Daniel Falele, and it wasn't a complete disaster like last year was. So in my opinion, they stacked contingency plan after contingency plan at offensive tackle, which is where they needed the stability. And it worked to get to the point where Ronnie Stanley could get back on the field. Ronnie Stanley looks like I guess maybe this is expectations, but when I go back and watch the Raiders game last year where he made his first start and then went out for the year and watch his movement now, it is night and day. The difference is like I'm just like I don't understand what was wrong last year. I hope we get kind of the medical story because I'm just so fascinated by it. But his movement skills are back. He's explosive again. He's reaching his depth and his vertical set. He's able to square guys up. He's moving seamlessly. He had this run block on it was Drake's second 30-yard run after the touchdown run, where he took this nice shuffle angle to the linebacker that really sprung that run. And it's just stuff like that he couldn't have done last year on his ankle. And so seeing that 2 weeks in a row where he's moving seamlessly, he's able to make quick cuts. It's all stuff that we saw in the 2019-2020 version of Ronnie Stanley, where he was an elite left tackle. So I didn't think he'd ever get back to that status, but that's because it sounded like his ankle was in such disarray, but it looks like we're going to get back there. So that being a huge fixture to go with, elite play from a guy like Kevin Zeitler, who's just always a good pass protector. You get Tyler Linderbaum looking like the rookie first rounder should look like in a center. You get Ben Powers in a contract year playing extremely well. He's been the most improved, not just the most improved offensive lineman, but the most improved Raven, in my opinion. One guy that I've had to eat huge crow on. And now you get the instability, though, at right tackle. So I thought Morgan Mose has been up and down all year, specifically in run blocking. He had a really good game against the Bengals, and then obviously the injury last week. Have we gotten details on that yet?
I don't think Harbaugh said it's nothing serious. So I think
okay. So we might just get him back and then we're good to rock. So hopefully, because I would just like what they're missing now, they have their the 5 guys that when you go back to post draft, post free agency, and you're like, what's the offensive line? It's the 5 guys that should be on the field right now. I guess not many people predicted Powers, but still you get the other 4. And so now they just need to gel. And you saw it. What can this offensive line do in the run game? Well, they can spring 30, multiple 30-yard runs again. They were mashing guys in the run game. Lamar Jackson has been pretty well protected outside of blitzes. They didn't really have any bad pass reps, in my opinion, on Sunday. So now it's just time for those 5 to kind of mesh together, stay healthy. You might be able to get away from extra protection, get back to 5, kind of man protections, more guys out running patterns. So I think that's really where they can get to with the offensive line.
Yeah, I've been very pleasantly pleased with what they've been able to do on the offensive line this year overall. And I know there have been a lot of question marks going into the year about it, but I think they've really performed in a lot of different areas. Definitely still room for improvement in certain areas, but I think they've done a good job this year. But Cole, we do have a couple mailbag questions, and they're both about some philosophy for what this team has done right now, and it comes from both Afidafoy and Jamal X. And the first one from Afidafoy: hi Kevin, do you think the historical defense and run is outdated? Thanks for your work and have a nice day. And also we have Jamal X who says, do you think Harb's coaching has become outdated along with his philosophy? There's been a lot of talk about John Harbaugh recently. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because it doesn't feel like that long ago that we had Marty Morningwig calling plays and we were saying, why won't the Ravens run the ball? And it was kind of constant passing. And so John Harbaugh is the kind of coach, and don't get me wrong, he has a philosophy, and I do think he leans towards controlling the clock, running the football, playing an efficient passing game, playing good defense. I think those are all things that have carried his entire time here. But I also do think he lets his coordinators call plays, and he really defers to them in terms of the game plan approach. And so I know that frustrates people, but it can also be good because, it gives an offensive coordinator who's designing an offense the leeway to call it the way they intended to design it. So there's, advantages and disadvantages of that approach. What I worry about is when you're the type of coach, and I mean, we all know John Harbaugh is more of the CEO type coach, as I just explained. When you have preparedness issues so much, I think that's where you start to question, what's going on in that CEO type role. But in terms of the approach, I know people want to get switched to the spread offense, and that's something that I just don't think we're going to see from this coaching staff. So if you think that's outdated, then yeah, I could see that argument being made, because that's not the type of offense they're going to use. They're going to run the ball. They're going to be a run heavy offense. They're going to use heavy personnel. They're going to use a lot of tight ends. They're just not going to get to that type of offense you want to see. So I think what concerns me is, and maybe this is silly, but like, if Lamar does move on from the Ravens, and I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, and then you see him in that spread type look, how much are we going to kick ourselves that we only got to see him in a Greg Roman offense? So I do wonder about that a lot. How much is that John Harbaugh just wanting to play that way? I think it's a little bit, but I also think he just lets his coordinators do their thing, because we did see pass heavy attacks from Marty Mornhinweg under John Harbaugh. So I don't know how you could see that and be like, well, he just wants to play defense and run the ball. I think he just lets his coordinators call plays. So that's kind of where I stand there. Yeah.
And it feels like we're seeing now with some of these newer head coaches coming in and across the league, they are calling plays sometimes for their team, but Harbaugh has been that always defer to the coordinators, and it feels like for him, the philosophy, people are getting tired of it a little bit, but they've been true to that philosophy for these past couple of seasons. We have seen success with it, but we've also seen the failures of what it can do sometimes. So it's a matter of finding that balance, I feel like, overall. But Cole, final question. I was asked a question on the radio yesterday, and it actually really intrigued me, and I wanted to ask it to you. So shout out to Vinny and Haney for asking it to me. But do you feel like right now, with everything you've seen for this team, are you a glass half full person or a glass half empty person? Or are you right in the middle right now for where you are with the Ravens?
Well, I got dubbed Purple Patrol, so I should be glass half full. But I don't know. I think I'm more glass half empty right now, and it's just because we're going on year 2 of seeing the same kind of issues. And some of these, I think, are beyond just everything starting to click. I mean, there's only so many times I can say, well, if they fix this, then they'll be fine. If they fix this, they'll be fine. It starts to get exhausting saying it. So I'm definitely more on the glass half empty. I think there's just my main reasoning. And I'm not really in the side of just fire everybody and, cut this guy and cut that guy. I'm not sure that fixes all your problems, but we just see such widespread inconsistency. It's not just, it's not just the plays that are bad. It's not just the pass protection that's bad. It's not the bad run block or the running back. It's every single play where they have a negative outcome seems to be a different aspect that goes wrong. And so that widespread inconsistency seems very, very difficult to kind of get together. So, I mean, you could look at Sunday and see, well, the run blocking clicked with the running backs. So there's definitely some hope, and I can see that. But I'm just in the territory after the last 2 years where the Ravens are going to have to prove it for me before that glass becomes half full again.
All right, I'll do one follow-up. Are you of the sense, since your glass half empty, are you impending doom right now where you think the Ravens aren't a playoff team?
No, because I think they have a perfectly reasonable way of winning this division. They're currently first in the AFC North. They don't play another team this year that has a winning record. They have obviously 3-3 teams like the Bengals. They're going to play the Browns. One game without Watson. So, I mean, they're going to have tough games, but they have a 4th place schedule, and they look to me to be better than the Cincinnati Bengals, who I think was the real contender for that AFC North with the Ravens. So I think they have every opportunity to win the division. And we've seen it like in the NFC Beast. We've seen teams that aren't real threats to make runs in the playoffs win the division and have that 4 seed. So, I mean, the Ravens could very well be hosting a playoff game come January. So it's not, I guess it's, glass half empty in terms of being true Super Bowl contenders, taking down Kansas City or Buffalo in a conference semifinal. That is hard for me to see, but can this team make the playoffs? Absolutely.
Yeah, it always felt like, even entering the season, the division would be between Baltimore and Cincinnati. And right now I do feel like Baltimore has the upper hand on them. And especially if they can figure out their issues. But the consistent criticism with the team over the past couple of years has been, can they win in the playoffs consistently? Can they get to the AFC Championship? Can they continue that ascension and not have complacency with we're going to get eliminated in the wild card or divisional round every year and then run it back and do the same thing each and every season? So I think, the Ravens are still a playoff team in my mind too, definitely, but they do have to prove that they can play with more consistency, play well in the fourth quarter. They're one of the worst fourth quarter teams in the NFL right now. They're averaging, I believe, under 4 points a game in the fourth quarter. Plus you have some of the blown leads that have happened as well. So a lot of stuff goes into this team right now, but they are a 3-3 football team, and that is the reality of the situation.
And right first now. In the division, to be fair.
Still, the AFC, so many expectations for the division this year, it feels like, Cole, and it just feels so underwhelming.
Yeah, it does. And even the Steelers haven't, I always expect the Steelers kind of like the Ravens. Even when the Ravens are bad, they're still not that bad. The Steelers look bad.
There's a lot that goes into what has happened in this division right now, but you have 2 3-3 teams, 2 2-4 teams, and the Ravens will face one of those 2-4 teams in the Cleveland Browns in Week 7 with Jacoby Brissett under center there, of course. But Cole, I appreciate you hopping on with me. Thank you so much for joining. Please tell people where they can find you and what you're working on content-wise.
Absolutely. At Cole Jackson FB on Twitter and over at Two Guys Watching Football on YouTube. Tons of film. I've done 4 videos this week, probably another one coming out. I also will have LaRon McClain joining me for a special one-on-one interview that I'm really looking forward to, talking about specifically 2008, 2009 seasons with the Ravens and, that 3-headed monster attack when they had Willis McGahee, Ray Rice, and LaRon McClain. I think it's going to be a really fun discussion, so look out for that.
I'm going to tune into that one. Be sure to check it out. Check out Cole's work. It'll all be in the description below. He does great content. You heard him here for about 35 minutes, so of course it's already good. But I appreciate you as always, Cole. Thank you so much. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens content, beginning to preview the Week 7 game with the Browns. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.